the Heartist podcast with John White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Awaken Heartist podcast. I am your host, John White. Okay, I'm going to jump right into this. Today's episode is about spirituality. Now, I don't want you to get scared off. All of you who are turned off by the trendy word, I hope to give you a new perspective on spirituality. One that is a little more down to earth. I see spirituality more from a human perspective. And in this episode, I'm going to explain that. I'm going to explain it through my experiences. So we're going to have to do a little rewind here and jump into story time. Throughout my life, self-worth has been a huge struggle for me. It has been one of the hardest, if not the hardest lesson that I've had to learn. I always judged my self-worth based upon how much others needed me and what I could do for them. As I got older, right around my mid-30s, I started to realize that this concept of being what other people needed me to be, or basing my self-worth around how much I'd made people laugh, or I made them happy or feel safe, I started to realize that this wasn't what self-worth was, or what self-worth means. Right around 2016, I started to see things from a different perspective. It all started through mediumship and meeting someone who kind of jump-started this whole process for me. I had received a couple readings from her, and these readings were from a different perspective. It was as if others were watching me and noticing these things that I felt inside that were incomplete to me, and then pointing them out to me. And at that point, that really just changed everything for me. And this is what I would call my awakening, the beginning of my awakening. I started to understand how important individuality is. Now, this may seem a little confusing, but I started to understand the importance of individuality and the bigger picture of that through my understanding that we are all one and we are all energy and we are connected, and that there is this collective consciousness. And I realized that if you don't have all of these individual pieces that are unique in themselves with unique experiences, then these parts or these individuals are not really contributing anything of importance to this collective consciousness, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And from there, it really made me realize that being myself and going through my own unique experiences, focusing on my strengths, understanding my weaknesses, so that I can contribute to this collective consciousness, this one, the universe. And also through that, this gets pretty deep, our soul, our spirit, is gaining more and more experiences by the more lifetimes, and the lessons learned through each one of those to bring back to its own collective consciousness, its higher self. So individuality and being your unique self is very important. And I very much learned this through being a dad I have two boys that are 11 and 12 right now, going on 12 and 13. And shortly after I had learned all of this about self-worth and individuality and the uniqueness and the being a part of this collective consciousness or the universe, they started to grow into their own personalities and kind of figure out, they were at that age where they started to figure out where they fit into the world, that they were separate from their mom and their dad. And it was perfect timing in a sense, because I have been able to help them while at the same time vicariously living through their experiences, almost like a reboot for me to go back and reprogram myself. Because right around that time period, the age that they are, is when I started to go through a lot of traumatic events in my life. So in a sense, I've been able to kind of go back and fix myself, but more importantly, I'm able to help them now. I can't say more importantly, I can say equally as important. I am able to help them with their own individuality. And I'm able to show them what we can do with our strengths, teaching them that weaknesses are just a part of us, that we can overcome and conquer them. And this just makes us stronger and happier. By noticing our weaknesses, we can learn to accept them and work on them after. That these strengths and weaknesses make up a very unique part of us, our individuality. And this is from a young age. So they have so many experiences that will make up other parts of them as they go on. But at this point, noticing these strengths and weaknesses and noticing their interests, the things that they love, and encouraging them to do them, the way that they learn, encouraging them and pointing out that, hey, you like to learn more hands-on, where you are more organized and like to read everything from a book or have the information right in front of you and learn that way. And the crazy thing is that both of these boys, they're literally a year and 5 days apart, and they are pretty much polar opposites. But at the same time, they're like twins and best friends. So through all of this discovery of individuality, you start to become more authentic. And I don't know about you, but I think the one thing that this world is lacking more than anything is authenticity. I believe that a lot of that authenticity is missing because people don't know who they are. And this brings me back to spirituality. What exactly spirituality is? By definition, spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul, as opposed to material or physical things. So when we talk about finding out who we are and our strengths and our weaknesses, our interests, things like that, they make up our own unique individual self. And that's all really spirituality is. It's learning who that individual is and then living a life towards bettering and making that soul happier. And through that happiness comes, service to others, and all of it comes back to adding to the collective. But at the same time, you're helping yourself by learning how to, gaining a toolbox to overcome obstacles, lessons that we have in life. That's what spirituality is. And it's crazy to me that it's kind of gotten misused and abused in a sense because people don't really know, or they're exploiting it to make money. And I'm not saying that, people like mediums or tarot readers or any of those things, any of those professions, they're not exploiting people. I definitely 100%. I follow a lot. I have tons of friends who are mediums and tarot readers and psychics, and those are my people. But in a sense, that people on the outside are kind of turned off because they almost look at it as an industry too much. Spirituality is an industry to make money off of, and it turns people off. I want to explain in this podcasting going forward what spirituality is to me, that it's a means to finding myself and using all of the tools that are available, all of the available energies that are available specifically to me to help me live a happier life. And since I started all of this, I am incredibly happier than I was 7 years ago. I can look back and see how each year I've just gotten happier and happier and more comfortable. And words like vulnerability, another one of the big, hardest lessons, but that word vulnerability and being vulnerable, you have to become vulnerable to be able to show and be your unique self. In a world where there's social media and people are able to judge you, it's very difficult to be yourself right now without judgment from the world. 30, 40 years ago, people, to get their news or their understanding of what other cultures were doing, they got a newspaper. So the individual that you were was only judged within your community. And that was tough enough. I know for me it was. I'm 42 years old, so things were a lot different when I was a kid. It was very difficult then, but it's even more difficult now. So spreading this knowledge is important to me, especially in a world where my kids are growing up. I do care about the younger generation or just people in general. I want people to be happy. If people are happy, then I'm not walking around in a world full of assholes. And I used to be one of those assholes. So it makes for a much happier world for all of us to share. I also think that spirituality is really, it's a way of life. It really is. And it's also subjective. Each person has their own truths and different paths and different experiences. So spirituality can be different between each one of us. Each one of us can have their own spiritual path. But the one common denominator in the whole spiritual way of life or spiritual belief or spiritual practice is that there is something greater than yourself. There's something more to being a human being, something more to this physical experience, and that the greater whole of which we are a part it's so huge, it's cosmic, it's the universe, and it is divine in nature. And you can kind of compare it to the other religions. Let's take Christianity, for example. There are many different denominations within Christianity. So there's many different truths to Christianity, with the central belief being monotheistic, the belief in one God that created heaven and the earth and the universe, and that Jesus is the Messiah or the Savior. So there's a common belief in Christianity, or a core belief, yet still many different denominations. And I just wanted to use that as a comparison just to kind of get you to understand that spirituality is so much more broad because we're talking about individuals. And these individuals understand the cause and effect of what they do and how they go throughout the world in their lives and their experience here on earth, that it affects not only themselves, but the universe. And this brings me to the difference between religious and spiritual. By definition, and if you only pay attention to the definition, I don't really have to explain it much more after this. It's very plain and simple. To be spiritual is relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. And being religious is relating to or manifesting faithful devotion to an acknowledged ultimate reality or deity. So being religious is more about a worship or devotion to a higher power, where spirituality, to be spiritual, is more of an acknowledgement that we are a part or that we are within this higher power. So there is a major difference between the two. And there's a lot of stigmas that are attached to being spiritual, what it means to be spiritual. People are always saying you got to meditate, you got to do yoga, you got to think positive thoughts and be of love and light and all of these different things. And that's all nonsense. Well, it's not necessarily nonsense, but it's really individualized. It's all about the individual. And the goal is to clearly be happier, to learn from these lessons that we have, to grow, evolve, change into the best versions of ourselves. And the best version of ourselves equals happiness. Isn't that our main goal in life? To be happy? This is all from my perspective. This is what I believe. Again, like I say in every other episode, take from it what you will. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you agree with parts. In the end, we're all spiritual beings living a human experience. In order to live the best experience here, we have to figure out who we are, the unique individual that each one of us is, and from that we will gain self-worth and an understanding of where we fit into this bigger puzzle that is the universe. I'm going to make a couple episodes out of this whole topic of spirituality. I'm hoping in the next episode to kind of give you some tools, maybe help you build a toolbox of spiritual things that you can do. I have literally, on my journey, acquired so many tools, just as I do here in my physical life. Constantly, any kind of tool I can have that I can get my hands on, I store it in my garage. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them that I don't even use, probably over around 60% of them, just because I'm waiting for the day that I'm going to need them. And I did the same thing with spirituality. I've been learning and dabbling in every little spiritual idea, tried to use it as a tool for myself, and a lot of the times just turned out it wasn't for me. Or let's take, for example, tarot cards or oracle cards. They come in handy sometimes, and then other times I won't use them for a long stretch. So it really depends, I guess, on whatever I'm feeling at the time. But I have all these tools available. I'm hoping that I can maybe help give you some ideas on some things that you can try out. I'm also going to have an episode on spiritual practices. So basically taking those tools and what you can do with them. Just give you some ideas. So that's kind of the outlook on what I'm planning to do here for the next couple episodes. Now, again, it may change a little bit. I may throw a different episode in between, depending on what comes up. I'm just really going with the flow, using my intuition to pretty much guide me through this entire podcast. So I think we'll wrap things up here. Thanks again for listening to another episode. And I hope that maybe this piqued a little bit of interest in spirituality and discovering your own path. And now you realize how important it is to the universe for you to be yourself. Because the universe depends on it. If you'd like to learn more about me and my experiences, follow @AwakenHeartist on Instagram or visit the website awakenheartist.com.